From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The Alabama Legislature will return to action this week after being off for spring break last week. There are no more breaks scheduled until the end of the session, so this begins the long haul over the next several weeks. Because the legislature spent the first 2 weeks in special session with the regular on hold, they may need to make up for lost time by speeding up the pace. Senate President Pro Tem Greg Reed told me this week we'll have 3 legislative days as opposed to the typical 2.
We're going to be working this week is going to be a 3-day work week.
Okay.
So we're back to it in session all 3 days. I think you're going to see some of that. I think we're going to have a number of 3-day work weeks to where there's a lot to do. We need to be meeting to be able to get things accomplished. And so I think you're going to see some of that as we move forward over the next several weeks.
My full interview with Senator Reed later in the show. The heart of session tends to include work on the state's budgets, the Education Trust Fund, and the General Fund, plus more than $3 billion in surplus revenue. The governor has submitted her budget proposals, but now the legislature will take over that process. In the Senate, General Fund Budget Committee Chairman Greg Albritton told his committee members that they'll be getting to work soon.
Be prepared. Our timeline is going to be tightened, so be prepared to move in, while not warp speed. Let's be prepared to get our requests in, make sure you do your homework, read the budgets, make sure we get things resolved, and that so that we can run smoothly as we approach the difficult times with this.
Before the break, the House saw some success, passing unanimous legislation, including a crackdown on fentanyl trafficking that's going to be in the Senate committee this week. Most agree that bill is likely to pass quickly, but bill sponsor Representative Matt Simpson of Daphne said that's just the first of many steps the state needs to take to combat the deadly drug.
There's an absolute need to educate the community on what's going on with fentanyl. So and I've talked with the Attorney General's office. They have the opioid settlement that's roughly around $300 million, maybe a little bit north of that. Half of that is going to go to the state, half of that's going to go to the cities. What we're going to do to address that settlement with that money, is to go to notifying the public, educating the public, let the public know about fentanyl, let them know about the precautions and to be aware of it. This is a multi-level attack. This bill that I filed today is not going to be the only answer. It's not the sole response on how we need to respond to fentanyl. We need to educate our community. We need to get people the counseling, the training, the opportunities to get the help that they may need. Either kids and go to their high schools, talk to them about fentanyl before they get on fentanyl. Once somebody gets on fentanyl, we need to spend the money that we have, and that's what that money will go to try to help them get off of fentanyl, to get off of these drugs. There's a multi-level facet of what we're trying to do here. This is just one tool in the chamber.
Most all agree that the top priority for lawmakers upon their return is reauthorizing and updating Alabama's economic incentive laws. Governor Kay Ivey, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, and top legislative leaders from both parties gathered to unveil the legislative package today at Riverwalk Stadium. They're calling it the Game Plan, a 4-bill package aimed at modernizing the tools the state uses to recruit major industry. The bills seek to raise the cap on the amount the state can leverage at one time in incentives, enhance the state's ability to establish mega sites ready for industry, create targeted incentives for innovation and entrepreneurship, and bring more transparency to the incentives process by putting any tax credits the state has offered online. It's rare that so many of the state's top leaders are at one press conference, so we were there to capture it all.
Thank you for hiring me as your head coach. We have a whole lot of potential on Team Alabama, and that's what we plan to capitalize on today with the official launch of my plan for Alabama's continued economic success, what I'm calling the Game Plan. The Alabama Jobs Act and Growing Alabama and all that we offer here in Alabama has been transformational to our state and most importantly for our hard-working families. Without it, we would not have the 4,000 Alabamians working at Mazda Toyota in Huntsville. Without it, Shipped would not have brought 800 more jobs to the folks in Birmingham. And without it, Airbus would not have experienced the massive growth in Mobile. Without it, Novelis would not be adding 1,000 jobs for Baldwin County. Without it, First Solar would not have brought more than 700 jobs to rural Lawrence County. Folks, we can thank the competitive incentive package we have in Alabama for the largest project rural Alabama has seen to date. And yes, I'll say it again, Alabama is working. Let's keep it that way by implementing the game plan.
Across the state of Alabama, we have to include as many people as we possibly can. And we are now moving this bill across rural Alabama. We're also looking to be inclusive in this bill. This bill will also support veterans, women, minorities to incentivize their business ownership to show that Alabama is a working opportunity. Job growth in Alabama is the key element to the state's strategic efforts to spur new investments, job growth in the rural areas. In 2022, there were more than 10 projects across rural Alabama, equaling to some 1,100 jobs with an investment with almost $1 billion, yes, with the B, in rural Alabama. And this has never been before. So with this JOB Act, we want to continue to provide more high wages to the citizens across this state to be able to raise the medium household income.
The 4 pieces of legislation outlined in the game plan addresses findings from the commission and are going to be essential to attracting high-paying, long-lasting 21st century jobs. Ask Coach Saban and Coach Freeze how successful Alabama and Auburn's recruitment efforts would be if they couldn't offer scholarships to high school athletes. Imagine every other SC school offering full ride scholarships, but Auburn, Alabama can't. Where do you think those recruits would not be going to school? They certainly would be going to the state wouldn't be coming to the state of Alabama. Same thing applies to economic incentives. We got to make sure we offer them in our state. Enhanced transparency to Alabamians with information related to companies receiving incentives is so important. All past and future receipts of incentives will be made public so taxpayers can feel confident in how their tax dollars are spent. By passing this game plan, we can create an unbeatable economic dynasty, just like Alabama's colleges and universities have created dynasties in athletics. It's time to join the team and help us push this incentive plan to victory.
We cannot predict what the economy of tomorrow will be like, nor can we say where it will be in 5 years. So we must create stability by moving this forward. I'm urging our legislators to pass the game plan legislation. And by the looks of it, they're all on board. I'm looking forward to signing this package of bills into law so that Alabama can keep winning.
When we come back, I'll go deeper into this topic and others with Senate President Pro Tem Greg Reed.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capitol Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capitol Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capitol Journal podcasts.
Former basketball player and Hall of Famer Charles Barkley is one of Alabama's most recognizable sports stars. Nicknamed the Round Mound of Rebound and Sir Charles, the Leeds native had a remarkable basketball career with the Auburn University Tigers before embarking on a career in the NBA. Barkley also played for the U.S. Olympic basketball team in the 1992 and 1996 Summer Games. Since his retirement in 2000, Barkley has carved out a niche as a basketball analyst, author, and commentator on political and social issues. Since 2001, Auburn University, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Phoenix Suns have retired Barkley's number 34 jersey. In 2006, Barkley was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Joining me next is Senator Greg Reed, President Pro Tem of the Alabama Senate. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Good to be here, buddy.
Well, we just got back from the ballpark where the game plan was introduced. This is the sort of the branding behind renewing and improving, according to y'all and the governor, the economic development incentive laws. I know it's quite a bit of material there, but walk us through the basics of what these bills are going to do.
Well, the one thing that's so important to average Alabamians in thinking about the topic of these incentives is how is Alabama able to be the most competitive that we can with other states? Mm-hmm. What are we competing for? We're competing for billions of dollars in investment. We're competing for jobs. We're competing for growth opportunities for our state. So I've been involved in this for a long time. The Jobs Act originally in 2015 was legislation that I carried in the state Senate. So we've been working on this moving forward. Alabama's project of trying to energize the process of recruitment was done with a pay-as-you-go kind of a program, which wound up being different than other states. It was very good for the state. If you come here and you do what you say you're going to do, as an industry we've attracted, then we're going to rebate, give you opportunities for resource that comes back to you once you've been able to finish doing what you said you're going to do. That has proven to be very successful. Now, we've learned a lot in this process. What are some of the things that have come up as we think about the game plan? Seeds is one of the pieces of legislation. You have to have a good product on the ground if you're going to be able to attract. If you're looking for a location, you need a graded site that's ready for you to build your business, build your factory. That's something that we've had, but we don't have as much as we've had in the past. A little bit of a product of our own success.
So the projects that we have won have taken up these sites.
That's right. So that's one of the elements. The Jobs Act renewal is another element in being able to look at transparency. A lot of folks have asked legislative members, hey, what are we doing? How are we spending the money? Why is it important? We're adding that new element there. And then also things that are important related to innovation, where you're talking about small businesses, startup businesses, entrepreneurship, a lot of things that are coming out of Innovate Alabama. All that together is the game plan. And I think it's going to be a great package. We're going to need continued engagement from legislative members as to the thoughts and ideas that they have from their own districts. And that's the process we're going to be involved in the weeks to come.
So you expect legislation to drop tomorrow, this week sometime?
You know, I don't know if the legislation is going to drop tomorrow, this week. I think there's already a lot of work being done on the legislation. So I think you're going to have a lot of engagement by members. That's one of the things that I want, that that the governor wants, the speaker wants, is to have our chambers involved and engaged in this process. They're going to have good thoughts, good ideas. They've seen things that have worked in their local communities, whether it's an urban setting or a rural setting. So we want to get that feedback. The goal is to pass the incentives, move them as quickly as we can, with everybody being involved and engaged in the process. That's my goal.
It's pretty notable that that on that stage was a bipartisan group. You had the leader, Democratic leader from your chamber, Bobby Singleton. You had the Democratic leader from the House, and Anthony Daniels. You know, that's a pretty notable thing considering these times, how polarizing things can be. So that tells me it's probably going to be a pretty, I don't know, maybe not unanimous, but pretty well-supported movement.
Well, I think it will be well supported, and I think that when you look at job growth, you look at investment in Alabama, when you look at how we grow our economy long term, how we focus on startup business and entrepreneurship, those are not Republican or Democrat topics. Those are Alabama topics.
And so Singleton talking about the rural stuff.
So I think you see that you're going to have engagement from Republicans and Democrats, because these are things that are important in everyone's district, whether you're from a district that's Republican or Democrat. Job growth and investment growth is something that you want. So I think we're going to have good engagement from all the members of the legislature.
It's interesting, and I was looking at that transparency component, which I know the Lieutenant Governor talked about. I was talking with Secretary Canfield, and I said, well, goodness, are you sure we want to lay all our cards on the table? Like, show other states our secret sauce? He said, well, the way we're designing it is that it would only be incentives that had already been projects you'd already won, not like we would show them our game plan during the competition, which I think is a relief in that regard. Let's switch gears. We're about to get back into session after one spring break week, kind of early in the session. So, you've dispensed with ARPA. You've had 1 week of regular session where the first bills started coming on the floor. Coming back into session tomorrow, what do you expect? I know incentives are going to be a priority. What do you expect to see in the legislature coming back?
Well, I think the legislature has already been very disciplined as we've gotten started with this, the first session of the new quadrennium. We made the decision with the governor's help to move forward on ARPA. That needed to be separate from a lot of what we were doing with budget-related topics. We've been able to handle that. Those resources are moving out now. They're already allocated. Water and sewer, hospitals, nursing homes, broadband internet access, different individual projects in communities across Alabama for those funds. That was a great process. We did a good job with it. It's behind us now. We're moving forward. You said last week we worked on legislation being introduced. I think a lot of members are now interested not only in the incentives, but they're interested in their own pieces of legislation, items that are important in their districts, topics that may be local bills, issues that are important only in their particular region of the state, for instance. And so we're going to get into that and begin to allow the committee process to work, allow this legislation to move forward, have the work of the committees show up in what we're doing with the different pieces of legislation. So I think we get going with that. We're going to be working, this week is going to be a 3-day work week.
Okay.
So we're back to it in session all 3 days. I think you're going to see some of that. I think we're going to have a number of 3-day work weeks to where there's a lot to do. We need to be meeting to be able to get things accomplished. And so I think you're going to see some of that as we move forward over the next several weeks.
Well, yeah, because you had the first 2 weeks of that 105 calendar period taken up completely by ARPA. So you almost just have a 2 weeks burned a little bit. So in order to have all those 30 days by June, you got to pick up the pace a little bit.
True.
Let's talk about budgets. The governor obviously released her budgets as prescribed by the Constitution. But, this is the legislative process. And I was talking with Director Poole, and he said, that he and the governor welcome and invite, changes to the budgets, and they expect it. And so I'm imagining we'll see some of that. Do you expect those budgets to start moving in the next couple of weeks, or is it going to be a while to the committee's work?
I think there's a lot of work to be done on the budgets. And let's be clear kind of what we're working on. You've got the education trust fund budget. You've got the general fund budget, which is everything in state government other than education. And then we also have the carry forwards or the surpluses primarily in the education budget that is a significant dollar amount that will be a supplemental budget item that will get a lot of attention. What the governor's done is she's addressed all of those in what she sent to the legislature. And you're right, I echo what Director Poole said. The governor's made some very strong suggestions. The legislature is going to really like some of them. They're not going to like some of them. That's the process. That's what we're supposed to do and what she's supposed to do in being able to offer us a lot of thought and idea. I think there are areas related to, again, our conservative approach to budgeting has been very successful. We see how well things have turned out as a result of that. Alabama's economy is strong. I think when we think about the supplemental, those surplus dollars, what are we going to do with them? I think the governor has proposed some rebates. I think there's some thought with that in the legislature that may be a benefit to send some of the resource back to those that send it to state government. Being able to also invest some of those resources. we've got some needs in the education realm that are going to be important, maybe with one-time money that we need to look at trying to figure out. Also, I think saving some of those resources is going to be important. If you watch the national news, you see that they're projecting that we're going to have some kind of a recession coming. We have to be very cognizant of that. The people of Alabama are depending on us to make wise decisions. So we don't want to spend a lot of the resource or all the resource and then be in a place to where we wish we had held some of that, for the next year or the next year. But also in the idea of maybe cutting taxes. Looking at some organic options that are beginning to grow are there areas that impact families, retirees, businesses, maybe even groceries? Is there an option to where over a window of time we can take some of the surpluses and be able to utilize that to reduce taxes on the people of Alabama? I think all those topics are on the table.
Yeah, I find the topic of the grocery sales tax really interesting because if you'd asked me, I don't know, last year or before the session, I wouldn't have named it as a top issue, but it's kind of organically become that because, representatives and senators from all kind of stripes and walks of life are coming up with these proposals. And so I'm really curious where that goes because it sounds like, and maybe this is partly because of the supplemental, partly because of the surplus in revenue, that it sounds like it's a more, doable, viable idea than it ever has been in the past.
Well, I think only because of the surpluses are reasons that we have an opportunity to talk about it. If you look at the numbers, it's $600 million that goes to our education budget from the grocery tax. And again, Alabama, we've seen the statistical data. Alabama has one of the lowest tax burden on her citizenry of any state in the nation. Now, other states don't tax groceries. Alabama chooses to do that. Is there a way that, even though we have the lowest tax burden already, are there ways that we can modify some of the taxes on food? And I just think that's an organic conversation. It impacts and affects everyone, every area of the state, whether it's rural, whether it's urban. So I think that's why you've begun to see this as a topic of discussion. And I have encouraged it within the Senate to continue to think about it, look at it, recognize we can't eliminate significant funding within our education budget, of course, long term. But if there are ways to use some of the funds that we currently have to be able to moderate some of those taxes over time, then it's smart for us to look at it, and it would be beneficial for the people of Alabama.
It's like you were saying about spending the surplus dollars. You don't want to come back, or saving them. You don't want to come back later and be sorry that you didn't do that. Well, it's kind of the same thing with a tax cut like that, because it does have a revenue impact on the education fund. I guess that's why it hasn't been done heretofore, is because, man, how are we going to make up that money? So that is a complicated issue. I think maybe folks sometimes don't appreciate how difficult and complicated it is, because come on, why not remove the sales tax on groceries? That's an easy one. But because of those revenues, because of that impact on essentially classroom spending, it's not exactly a black and white issue. Well, that's a lot to tackle coming back from the legislature. Are y'all ready to get started?
We're off to the task, my friend.
That's great.
We've got a very robust attitude within the Senate, and certainly I think within the legislature. I think, as I said earlier, we've been very disciplined. Let's get all the elections behind us. Let's get everyone inaugurated and sworn in. Let's get busy for the people of Alabama. Deal with ARPA right off the bat. Get those resources headed to the people, and then let's dive into these other issues with incentives to keep job growth, to keep economic development strong, and then let's figure out the issues, which are good problems to have. If you've got surplus resources, your economy's strong and you've been doing some things that are positive. So now how do you make wise choices? And that's what the people of Alabama are depending on us to be able to do in the months to come.
Well, we will be tracking it here at Capitol Journal. Senator, thanks again for coming in.
Thank you, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Birmingham's Rickwood Field is the nation's oldest operating ballpark and served as the home field of the Birmingham Barons, Birmingham A's, and the Birmingham Black Barons for decades. The Birmingham Barons inaugurated the new field on August 18, 1910, by defeating the Montgomery Climbers. The Black Barons played there between 1924 and 1950. Rickwood hosted Birmingham's minor league teams for several seasons through 1987. From 1967 to 1975, the Barons were owned by Ensley native Charlie O. Finley and were part of the Kansas City and later Oakland A's organization. More than 100 members of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame have played at the field, including Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige, and Willie Mays. Today, the historic field is managed by Friends of Rickwood and hosts local amateur and college teams. The Birmingham Barons still play a ceremonial throwback game at the ballpark every year, the Rickwood Classic, which celebrates Barons teams of the past and this historic field.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night for more coverage of the Alabama Legislature here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.